Hello, and welcome to the English live stream. Our aim is to help you improve your English and take it up to the next level. And if this is the first time you're watching, you're very, very welcome. We will introduce ourselves sitting over there, or in other words, on the other side of Valencia, is my good friend Lynne. Hi, Lynne.
Hello, hi. Okay, so my name is Lynne, and I'm free. I'm
What
an
are you? What are
online.
you?
I'm an online English teacher, and Put It Like This is my company, and PutItLikeThis.com is my website, and I specialize in tailor making English courses for people to help you find your own voice in English. So depending on your objectives, I create a course to fit you. And if you're interested in seeing more about the types of courses that I do, you can go to PutItLikeThis.com and find out more information. And you can contact me over the website as well, because there's a contact page.
Okay, PutItLikeThis.com for tailor-made English tuition. And if you haven't seen me before, my name's Craig. I have written material for mansioningles.com, which is a website for Spanish speakers who want to improve their English. And there's a podcast over at inglespodcast.com. If you prefer improving your English by listening, you might want to go to that website to listen to our podcasts. There's 561 of them, so lots of material there for you to listen
Wow.
to. 10 years.
561.
Yeah, it's 10 years now. So lots of material there. Also on Spotify and wherever you like to listen to your podcasts. And if you're interested in improving your spoken English, you might want to go and check out EnglishCraig.com, because next week I'm starting another conversation course. So if you want information about that, if you need help with your speaking, more confidence, more fluency, EnglishCraig.com, and you can book a free consultation with me. No cost, no obligation, just a chat to see what your needs are. EnglishCraig.com. But we're here today to talk to you about some controversial topics, aren't we, Lynne?
Well, we're going to teach you. We're not going to be controversial, maybe, but we're going to teach you how to talk about controversial topics. So how to give your opinions, how to agree, disagree, how to hedge. Sometimes you might not want to give your opinion openly because it's so controversial. So how to avoid offending people by hedging your opinion, and also about how to have expressions to help you really listen better to the opinions of others by asking for clarification, or asking or rephrasing and paraphrasing to ensure that you're actually listening to the arguments of other people when you're discussing controversial topics. So we're hoping to give you the English skills to manage all of that, really.
Yeah.
And maybe just before we continue, maybe one very important thing to realize here is that we are going to show you lots of different expressions in each of the different categories, but it's impossible to remember all of those. So I think when you're learning English, it's a question of, it's like growing in English. So maybe you know that you can give your opinion and you tend to use the same expression over and over again. And so in order to grow in English, you need to start adding maybe one or two expressions that are new to give you a little bit of variety when you're speaking English. And it also improves your fluency because people don't want to hear you repeating yourself all the time. So when we'll give you a selection of phrases. But remember, you shouldn't try to learn all of them. Choose one that you think you don't use now, but you would like to add to your repertoire. Maximum 2, right? And then if you choose 2 from every category, at the end of this class, you'll probably have 10 new phrases. That is more than enough.
Yes,
1 hour.
absolutely.
Because
So
you want to be able to remember them.
yeah. So play around, experiment. We want your opinions. We want to know what you think. So as we put questions up during this live stream, please write your opinions and practice these expressions and write them down and try to remember them and use them. If you're watching live, please say hi. Let us know you're out there, because sometimes we're not actually sure anybody's listening. So please let us know you're there. Say hello, tell us where you're from. And of course, if there's anything that's not clear, ask us questions as we're speaking, and we will answer them if we can. So
And we
don't.
will be giving you opportunities to practice these during the class. So when you select 1 or 2 that you like in each category, when you give us your opinions in the chat, we want to make sure you use them. So see if you can try to use them actively as well.
Exactly. So let's get started. Our first group, our first selection of expressions, giving an opinion. How can you give an opinion in English? If you can think of any expressions for giving opinion, maybe write them in the chat. Let's get going with some of your ideas. What expressions would you use to give your opinion in English? So before you say what you think, what are those expressions in English that you can use to introduce your opinion? People are starting to join us. Hi, Rothio. Hi, Paula. Good to see you here.
Hello. Hi.
Welcome. So, shall we go ahead with some of these
maybe go
expressions?
ahead. And I'm sure that you've probably seen these if you've learned English in course books, because they tend to give these kind of things. So some of these expressions you can use first, and then you signal to people that what you're going to say is your opinion, right? So you can say, of course, the easiest one is to say, I think, but that's very poor.
That's very basic English, isn't
It's
it?
very basic, yeah. So you can say things like, from my point of view, I think, or you can say, as far as I'm concerned. Now, as far as I'm concerned, that's something you're going to have to practice the pronunciation of, because we don't say as far as I'm concerned. We say as far as I'm concerned. And we stress the word I'm. As far as I'm concerned. So you can maybe practice that. As far as I'm concerned, and then you continue.
In fact, with many of these expressions, it is common to stress the pronoun. You do that with the first one as well. From my point of view, from my point of view, or the next one, I would say that. Now you can contract I would to I'd. I'd say that. That's fine. Or I would say, because if you're stressing the I, that is stressing your opinion, what you think. So someone said something, someone's given their opinion, and then you say, well, I would say that, or I wouldn't say.
Exactly. It seems to me that, and notice as well, I'm stressing the pronoun me. It seems to me that, and then you can continue.
Hi, Hema. Good to see you. Thanks for joining.
Oh, yeah. Hi, Hema. Thank you. Great. Hi. Paula's also put one up there. She said Paula's shared one, in my opinion, which is, of course, a very common one.
Yep. Personally, I think is another one you could use. Personally, I think, or the way I see it, again, I'm stressing that pronoun, the way I see it is blah, blah, blah.
And then there's another couple, to my mind, which is again, it just means in my opinion, to my mind, again, stress my, and the last one, of course, the conditional. If you ask me, I think, and you continue like that. Now, notice that it's interesting because Paula did say you can say, in my opinion, and you can. But often when I'm examining and the students are discussing with each other, if you keep saying, in my opinion, and in my opinion, and in my opinion, it makes you sound a little bit pompous. Would you like to explain what pompous means, Craig?
I'm just writing it in the chat. It's when you're looking down your nose at someone, when you're very posh, when you're distancing yourself from someone, so
And you
you're
think you're
not their
better.
equal. You think you're better than the other person. Yeah.
And it's okay, it's perfectly okay to say, in my opinion, once. But I think that if you repeat, in my opinion, in my opinion, in my opinion, then it makes you sound pompous. So I would be very careful with the in my opinion. Once is okay. And then maybe pick one or two of those expressions that were on the banners. And I think Craig has put them in the chat file now. So maybe select one or two of those new ones for you, and then see if you can use them for the next question, because we're going to ask you to give us an opinion about this topic. Can you flash up the topic?
And here it is. Should English be taught in all schools around the world as a lingua franca? Should there be only one language? Should there only be English as a world language? What's your opinion? Now you've got some expressions to give us your opinion. You can play with those and use one that maybe you wouldn't normally use. So choose one of these expressions that is not in your active vocabulary. Maybe you've seen it before, but you wouldn't normally use it. You wouldn't say it. So practice that and tell us what you think. Should English be taught everywhere around the world as a lingua franca? What do you think, Lynn?
Now, well, you'll notice today that we have chosen some very controversial topics. So these are things that are not maybe things that you talk about regularly, but we have given you these topics because, to really, so that you can modify your opinions as you go. But remember, we accept all opinions and we're tolerant, right? Okay, well, to my mind, Craig, of course, English should be taught in all schools around the world as a lingua franca. And the reason for this is that I want to earn a living. And of course, if English was taught in all schools around the world as a lingua franca, I would always be in a job. So from a very selfish perspective, to my mind, I think that's true.
I agree 100%. I couldn't agree more. It seems to me that English is the most used language, especially in international business. So it just makes things easier. I mean, personally, I think it will be so much easier to communicate if everybody spoke the same language. And I think that language should be English.
So can you put your opinions in there? You don't have to agree or disagree with us yet. You can do that a little bit later, but maybe just put your opinion first. Give us your opinion and a reason about should English be taught in all schools around the world as a lingua franca.
What do you think, Gemma? Do you agree? What's your opinion? Javi. Oh, Javi's here. Hi, Javi. Good to see you. Paula, Rocío, what's your opinion?
Well, while they're writing, I think we need to teach as well the word devil's advocate.
Yes.
Can you write that in the chat file? Devil's advocate.
It's the same translation in Spanish, isn't it?
Is it?
Yeah.
So if we play devil's advocate, it means we deliberately take an opposing position just for the fun of it. Devil's advocate. So if I'm going to play devil's advocate here, I can also say, as far as I'm concerned, I think that's nonsense about English being the lingua franca. I mean, you have to see that maybe for the Western world, maybe for Europe, for America, well, America speaks English, but maybe for Europe, for South America, it might be interesting. But there are billions of people who live in Asia. If you think of China and India as the most populous countries. So, like proportionally, the number of people who speak Chinese languages, there are several, or Indian languages, there are several. there isn't really a strong argument about why English should win out. I think we're seeing that very much from our perspectives because we're European.
Yes, yeah, that's a good point. But if you look at a table of the most spoken languages, English is first. In fact, there are more people speaking English as a second language than there are English speakers as a first language. So as a means of communication, it is the most used language, I think,
So as a lingua franca, then,
as
in
a
that
lingua
sense, as a
franca.
real lingua franca.
So
Okay.
we've got an opinion here from Javi. Let's see what Javi
Lovely.
says.
So Javi says, and it looks right to my mind, I think it would break the language barriers. But on the other hand, each language has its own richness. Yes. Yeah. I think I agree with Javi, actually.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, we were playing devil's advocate, weren't we?
We were indeed. And of course, there was another language, wasn't there? I mean, there was the artificial language, Esperanto. And
Esperanto.
there are some people who speak Esperanto, but it never really caught on.
No,
And I think that that's probably because there was no culture behind it. And there's something with a language, that it does have elements of culture. I don't think English anymore is completely tied to the UK or the American culture.
no.
I think, and because of that, I think it's getting more popular as a common language.
I think that's true. Yeah.
I think when it was very culturally browned to the UK or to America, then it could have some like associations that were maybe not so attractive for some cultures. But I think as a sort of business language or a common language to communicate with foreigners, it's becoming very popular, I think.
Okay, let's move on to qualifying your opinion, or as Lynn said earlier, hedging. So, what exactly does hedging mean? Is it saying that you're not going to commit yourself and say what you think? Are you avoiding the question?
I think so. I think I don't know where hedging comes from. The word hedge, HEDGE, describes a border, a border of a garden or a border of a field to the road, which is made of plants. That's a hedge. So it's usually like instead of a wall, you have a wall of plants, of bushes, really, isn't it? Not
It's kind of
trees,
like a
but bushes.
boundary. It's like a
It's a
boundary, isn't it?
bound.
Protecting
Yeah,
something.
it's a boundary.
You
And
can.
when you are hedging in terms of an opinion, it's does it mean that you're like hiding behind the hedge a little bit? You don't want to
Yeah,
expose yourself.
yes,
You're
you're
trying to
protecting
hide.
yourself, aren't you? You're
Yeah.
protecting yourself from offending somebody or getting something wrong. You can hedge your bets. That's a common expression. So you're protecting yourself against something by hedging your opinion in this case. So let's look at some expression. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, yes, and I was just saying that, of course, we teach in the books often, in the English books, they teach you to agree and disagree. But in real life, most of us, we only give such outright opinions that what we really think with our families or close friends, because when you're in with strangers, I think the social thing to do is to sort of be more, you're looking for harmony or you're looking for agreement with people.
You haven't been
And
on Twitter recently, have you?
no. I mean, Twitter is definitely not about that, but a real social situation often
Face
is
to
you
face.
qualify face to
Yeah.
face, you qualify your opinion because you don't want to offend people. Maybe, or maybe it's a topic that you really don't know anything about. So you don't want to expose yourself because you don't know so much. So there are many expressions that we use which are qualifying your opinion or hedging. Shall we have a look at those?
Before that, let's see what Paula says. She thinks
Mm-hmm.
it's a universal language. Yes, I agree, Paula. English is a universal language, and it's really good that you're studying it and improving your English. And Javi says Malaysia established English as its second language. Yes, I think Singapore did too, didn't it?
Did they?
I think so. Yeah. So it's a very good language to know. Let's say. So yeah, the expressions for hedging or not committing to your opinion, we've got, well, that's a complex issue. So right from the start, from the beginning, you're saying it's complex, it's difficult. Yes, it's a complex issue. Or you can say, to be honest, it's not something I've really considered before. This is also kind of used to play for time, especially if you're in a job interview or an English exam and you need some time to think. You can use this expression before you give your opinion. So it's, yeah, to be honest, it's not something I've really considered before.
And then, of course, if you're not really sure about your opinion, so instead of saying things like to my mind or in my opinion, then we hedge by using these two phrases. There are those who would say this, but some people feel this. And when you talk about there are those who, you're talking about other people think this and other people think that, but you're not actually committing to what you think. But you are giving a considered opinion about possible opinions, if you like.
And that
So
you
that's
hear
that's a
that,
very common way to hedge.
and you hear that very often in interviews where the interviewer doesn't want to directly ask a question, especially if they're interviewing politicians. So you might hear an interviewer say, there are those who say, Prime Minister, that your policies are not working. So that question comes from other people. So the interviewer is hedging and not asking the question directly.
And it also means that the interviewer will not be the direct brunt of the attack or the defense, in a sense. That you have to talk about. You have to talk about it more generally. I can't be personally attacked for that. Yeah.
So where are we? Some people feel that, not I feel, some people feel. And also, I don't think I'm qualified to give an opinion on that. So that's more really discounting and refusing to give an opinion. I don't think I'm qualified to give an opinion.
To give an opinion on that. You might also give an opinion afterwards, but I think if you say, I don't think I'm qualified to give an opinion on that, but maybe I would say, I think we do use that and then give an opinion, but it's don't hold me responsible for my opinion because maybe I'll change my mind when I learn more.
Exactly.
So they're quite nice expressions. Yeah.
So I'm putting those now in the chat. Let's give you another question to ponder and think about.
Can you just, before you give us the question, Javi has also added a couple more expressions that he uses in those situations.
I've heard,
which is also nice. I've heard, but it's not my opinion. I've heard other people. And it is believed that, exactly. Yeah. And it's believed that you're saying...
Also, it's said that...
Passive, it's said that.
People say...
People say, So you put the opinions on other people. So again, just select a couple from there, one or two that you don't usually use, but you think I quite like that. And then maybe you can give us an opinion on this question. Here's another
again, quite controversial.
Should developed countries be obligated to accept more refugees? Now, because immigration is a big hot topic now, isn't it? In many, in the political area of many countries. So should developed countries be obligated to accept more refugees? So take your time. Maybe you can use one or two of the expressions. I think we've chosen this question because I think this is a one where most of us are not experts. So we might want to hedge on this one. I don't know. Craig, what do you think? Should developed countries be obligated to accept more refugees?
Let me think for a second. Well, it's a complex issue, isn't it? I mean, to be honest, it's not something I've really considered before. However, we've seen recently that countries in Eastern Europe, such as Poland, for example, are accepting a huge number of Ukrainian refugees. And it's putting a lot of pressure on social services, on the job market, on housing. So I think there should be a limit to the number of refugees that countries should be obligated to accept, because in some cases the country just doesn't have the infrastructure to take the refugees in. As much as you want to help, I think that there needs to be a limit. What do you think? What's your opinion, Lynne?
I think also it's a very complex issue. I think if I take the issue to another level, I think there is. It depends. I think it's very difficult for countries to be obligated to accept more refugees in the current structure of the world. Because in the current structure of the world, we have this concept of nation and we have this concept of country, which, of course, is not. It's a concept. It's not a physical thing. It's not like a mountain or a sea. The concept of country or the concept of a nation is something that most of the world's citizens accept. Millions of years ago, that wasn't the case. People moved freely back and forth. But of course, we have this system now where we have countries, and there's a lot of very complex things that are connected to the idea of country, like tax collection, education, systems, work, culture. Lots of things are connected with a country. And I think the problem when you force countries to accept refugees is that those systems become unstable in some way. So people get very upset because their tax revenue is being spent on people who haven't actually paid the taxes in the first place. So some people feel that that's unfair. Other problems occur that the cultures of countries get changed because there's a big influx of other cultures and cultures influence each other. So it is a very, very complex issue. And I think it's very difficult to oblige countries to accept more refugees because usually it's something that even if politicians want to do it, if it gets very intense in certain areas, the local people generally reject it. But I do think that there is a moral obligation to accept refugees because they're people. We're all people. And sometimes the circumstances in the countries where we live make it imperative that for safety that we move. And the world is full of movement, and it's always been full of movement. And I think really people should not be rejected from moving physically to a place of safety.
And also
But it's
to
very
add,
complex.
and I'd like to add that some people feel what's happening in the US under the Trump administration is quite ironic because they're deporting refugees that have been in the country for years, and the US is a country that has been built by not by refugees, by immigrants. So they're deporting people saying they don't belong there, they want to keep the country for Americans, although actually the country has been built by immigrants in the first place.
I think probably that is the case for most countries in the world. Yeah,
Yes.
that most countries at some point were built on influxes of people from other nations and other areas. And there's constantly has been, but that's what I'm saying. It's this concept that we have in modern history, or relatively, I'm talking about like the whole span of the earth, like billions and billions of years. It's a relatively modern concept, that you have this idea of nations.
Javi has an opinion, and which he's hedging. He's hedging his opinion here by saying, well, that's a complex issue. But I don't think the term obligated is the right term. But I think countries should consider taking refugees as a human act, taking into account its capabilities.
Very nice opinion there.
And he continues, developed countries could fulfill its workforce properly, training refugees and integrating them into their societies. So it can become a win-win. Yes, I agree 100% with that, Javi. Yeah.
And I think as well that I think it's important to promote the idea of the fact that culture is always changing. And I think that sometimes we make errors when we think that cultures have to be preserved, pristine, because that is contrary to what culture is. Culture is always in change, in flux, because it's always getting new impulses. And I think that that's often a problem. People talk about the culture being changed, with foreigners coming into the culture. But culture is always in flux, isn't it? The culture of our parents with their values and their norms is completely different to what we have today and probably what my children will have in the future. Yeah.
It's not set in stone.
It's never set in stone.
It's not fixed. Exactly. No. If you are joining us, we noticed that some people have been joining us in the last 10, 15 minutes. Say hi, let us know where you're from, and answer these questions with the expressions that we're sharing with you on the screen and in the chat. So be as vocal as possible by writing, of course, not shouting. So let's move to agreeing. How can you agree? I just agreed with Javi. Do you remember what I said when I agreed with him?
Oh, I didn't.
I said I agree 100%, which we don't have that here, but you can agree 100% with someone, or you can say that's exactly how I feel. Yes, that's exactly how I feel. What other expressions are there, Lynn?
You can say you're absolutely right. Now, I've put that one there because in a lot of English books they put I totally agree. And then I have, again, students who keep saying, I totally agree, I totally agree. And that also makes you sound pompous all the time if you say it too often, just like that word before, like, in my opinion. But we say things like, you're absolutely right.
I couldn't agree more. That's one of my favorites. I couldn't agree more. It's impossible for me to agree with you anymore. I couldn't agree more.
I couldn't agree more. Or that's a good point. Or I see what you mean.
If you're listening at home, repeat these after us. Copy our intonation, and that will improve your pronunciation. That makes sense to me. Yes, that makes sense to me. You can modify these expressions with adverbs. You could say that makes absolute sense to me, or that makes total sense to me.
You have a point there. And that means that I recognize the point that you're trying to make, and I'm accepting that point. You have a point there. And you can say, I think so too. I think so too, which means I think exactly like you do. So I don't know if there's some of those phrases. I'm sure that most of you understand those phrases, but ask yourself, do I actually use those phrases, or do I keep saying, I agree, I agree, I agree? Yeah. So try to pick one or two that you think you don't use and see if you can use them. Now, we've talked about, should English be taught in all schools around the world as a lingua franca? Craig and I said yes. I said yes because I want a job for life. And Craig said yes because he thought it was a good idea, because in business everybody uses it. We also talked about, should developed countries be obligated to accept more refugees? And we had a few comments there from Javi, for a few opinions from Javi, from me, from Craig. So can anybody agree with us in any points? Can you try to write a sentence and say which part of what we talked about you agree with?
Gemma's got a comment here. She says, as I see it, very good, Gemma, what cannot be done is to return them back to the life they had. Yes, I couldn't agree more, Gemma. It's
Yes,
not fair.
And you have an absolute point there. That is so correct, because it's not the question of what we can do. It's the question of what can we not do, or what should we not do in those situations.
And as I see it, you
And
can't
that's
just
true.
send them off to Uganda. Where was it? Rwanda or Uganda?
Rwanda and
Rwanda?
all over. They're
Yeah.
sending them, and I think now in America, there's been proposals to send them to Panama, isn't it?
No, I think it was it Costa Rica? Was it Puerto Rico? Was it?
Or Puerto Rico. I'm not sure. Well,
I
Puerto
think
Rico, they're sending prisoners to Puerto Rico.
prisoners. Yeah, yeah.
But I think yeah, it's not a good idea, I think.
Javi says, to be honest, I barely use them. Well, here's your chance. You can practice some of these with us now. Hello, Rita. Rita's here from Italy, who says, in Italy, we really often use, maybe rarely, I think, Rita, right? We rarely often use absolutely. And I don't agree with this adverb. I think it's a bit silly way it's a silly way to imitate a language that's not ours.
Because you think it's too final to say absolutely.
You mean, I'm not sure if I understand
I think
that,
she
Rita.
means that in Italy, lots of people say absolutely all the time.
Oh, okay.
And
Yeah.
so she thinks that they're overusing it. I think that's what you mean, Rita. And yeah, I can get that, because it's true that I've noticed in some, like I have a couple of students who keep saying super, it's super big, it's super,
Awesome.
super, all
Awesome.
awesome. And I think it's true with any of those words. If you use them too often, then it doesn't sound very articulate. So that's why this variety is good. But today, because we know it's impossible to assimilate 5 different expressions in 5 categories in one class. So that's what we're trying to encourage you to do, is just to take a new one and try to add that to your repertoire. And then a little bit later, you take another one and you add it to your repertoire, and it gives you more variety, I think.
So let's move to the next category, which is disagreeing. So we had agreeing, now we're disagreeing. And here we've got some examples for you. I'm not sure I agree. That's probably what I use, because I'm not aggressively disagreeing, but I am expressing my disagreement. I'm not sure I agree with you.
Yes, I like to use that one a lot as well.
I'm not
because
sure about that.
I don't like to be controversial, but I also don't like to be silent if somebody is giving opinions that I don't agree with. Because I don't want them to think, because I'm silent, that I agree with them.
Yes.
So I like to say, I'm not sure I agree. Or you can say, I see your point, but... and then you can bring a counter argument.
I'm not sure, which is very similar to I'm not sure I agree. I see things differently. I wouldn't say that myself. I wouldn't say that.
You can say, I don't think so. I don't think so. Or you can say, that's not how I see it. And again, notice that I'm stressing the I. That's not how I see it. And so you're showing the disagreement there.
Because
Or
Gemma before said, as I see it, so she was giving her opinion, but what this is doing is disagreeing by saying, well, I don't
that's not
see it
how
that
I
way.
see
That's
it.
not how I see it. Yeah.
Or I don't see it that way. And then, of course, you can use the beautifully polite English one, which is I'm afraid, which has got nothing to do with fear. We're not afraid of you at all, but it's just very polite to say I'm afraid I don't agree, which is sorry, but.
And we like to apologize before we disagree. English people like to do that. So I'm sorry, but I don't see it that way. I'm sorry, I can't agree with you. I'm afraid I don't see it that way. So we like to use those prefixes, those expressions at the beginning.
And it
Okay,
softens it,
so
doesn't it?
do
So
we
is
have
there
another
anything that you
question?
disagree with that we've talked about so far about refugees or about English being the lingua franca? Can you disagree with anything that we've said or anything that anybody else has said there?
I wouldn't say that, Javi. I can't. I couldn't agree more is common, but not. I can't disagree more.
No.
You could say Rita won't like this, but you can say I absolutely disagree.
But Rita
I
won't like it,
totally,
but
but
it's
Rita won't
true.
like it. I totally disagree. I absolutely disagree, or I disagree.
Or I can't agree at all. I can't agree
Yes.
at all. And we would emphasize the at all. So agree more, disagree at all. Yeah, maybe.
So let me put those. Did I put those in the chat? Those disagreeing expressions?
No, you haven't put them in
Not
yet.
yet. No. So let's put those in the chat so that you can use them when we get to the next question. And I think we need to move a bit quickly so that we can get to those questions at the end.
Okay. So
The next group of expressions we've got questioning, asking for clarification. How can you do that in English? So let's show you some expressions.
yeah, now this is a little bit to make sure that in a discussion, it's not always so confrontational, because real discussions are not I agree, I disagree. It's not, it doesn't go like that. And if you're really trying to discuss something in depth with someone, it's very important that you understand what they are trying to say. So sometimes we ask for clarification before we disagree with them, because maybe we've misunderstood. So what you can do is, now this requires more English skills, because of course you have to paraphrase back to the person what they have just said to you. So you can say, so let me get this right. You mean that, Craig, so let me get this right. You mean English is a good idea because of business?
That's right, because business people use English to communicate, especially as a second language. So I think it should be lingua franca. Exactly right. Yes.
So really, as far as you're concerned, you're looking at English in the sense of it being a transactional language.
Yes.
So English is only the means to an end. It's got nothing to do with culture or art or pleasure, or it's purely for transactional purposes like traveling or bargaining.
Well, that's true up to a point, but I would also say that if you are in business, then you do want to create relationships and have some kind of a bond with the person you're speaking to, which might go into the area of art and culture and other things. So yes, I think it should be used for international business. Also, you can say, I'm not sure I follow. Do you mean? So again, you're paraphrasing with that. Do you mean to say that, or do you mean blah, blah, blah? By the way, these expressions I use all the time in Spanish just to check information. If someone tells me something important at the doctor, for example, and I want to check that I've understood, I'll paraphrase with an expression like this in Spanish because I want to make sure I've actually understood what the person has said. So this very useful in a speaking exam, for example, or in a discussion on a controversial topic, but also just to double check that you've understood correctly.
And finally, another way of saying that is say, you can start with, so what you're saying is English should be used in business situations. Or in other words, you see English simply as a tool to achieve your objectives in business. Is that right, Craig?
Yes, you've hit the nail on the head. That's absolutely what I meant before.
Okay, so all of that can help to clarify and rephrase so that you're sure that you're definitely understanding the other person before you agree or disagree with them. Yeah.
So those
Very
expressions
important.
those expressions are in the chat as well. So we've got giving your opinion, qualifying your opinion or hedging, agreeing and disagreeing, and questioning and asking for clarification. We suggest you use one from each group as you're answering the questions that we're going to show you on the screen. So practice the vocabulary, try to use expressions that you would not normally use, and give us your opinion. And agree and disagree with what we say and with what other people say in the chat. So what's the next question? Let's see. Something nice and controversial. Here we are. Should freedom of speech have limits in the digital age? There's been a lot of discussion in the news and online and between my family and friends about this topic. Is it controversial among your friends, Lynn? Are people talking about it?
Well, I know, actually, I'm pretty sure, Craig, that you and I are going to disagree about this.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Are we like playing devil's advocate or just giving honest opinions?
I'm being honest opinions. And I think I'm a firm believer. As far as I'm concerned, I think we have to be very careful in the digital age. And it's not because I don't believe in freedom of speech, because I do. I think people should be free to be able to give their opinions. But I think we have a very serious danger in the digital age, because before Twitter and social media, when somebody gave an opinion that might have been offensive, or it might have been an opinion that created hate or encouraged people to be violent, for example, that was limited in its scope because you were limited to the amount of people who heard that message. The problem I have in the digital age is that things become popular in the digital age, not because of true popularity, but because of algorithms. So somebody might make a statement and people can agree or disagree. And we tend to have the idea that the more people who agree, then that opinion is the accepted opinion, and it moves society in a certain direction. The difficulty I have with digital is that sometimes opinions that can be quite controversial are amplified beyond their real acceptance, and it can cause a lot of damage, I think.
So let me get this right. As far as you're concerned, you worry that more people might be offended because of the reach of digital media?
Well, not so much offended, but more influenced by things that are pretending to be popular but are not popular.
So, if I understood correctly, you're blaming the algorithms, not that. So you defend the right of people to say what they want to say, but I don't see how that can be moderated
Nor do
online.
I, but I think it's a serious problem. And I think that's the problem that we have. I mean, people can believe what they want. They can believe that, I don't know, what Donald Trump says is true, what Putin says is true, what Zelensky says is true. People can have a position on that. But when people who can manipulate algorithms can propagate those voices way beyond the natural acceptance of things, they can create a narrative and assert a narrative that isn't really reflective of the way people really do believe. It's very difficult to find the truth in that of the popularity of it, I think.
Well, that makes sense to me. I think you have a point there. I think we agree on the danger of algorithms, but do we agree on the fact that free speech has no limits, or should it have limits? Where do you draw the line with free speech?
It's difficult, isn't it? I mean, I do draw the line if I see people deliberately trying to incite hatred or violence against people. I think that's really stretching the limits of freedom of speech.
I think you're absolutely right. I agree 100%. Does anyone have an opinion on this? Are you agreeing with us? Are you disagreeing? Are you hedging your opinion?
I thought you would disagree, actually, because you've always defended freedom of speech very, very strongly.
Well, up to a point. That's the thing, up to a point. And I agree with you totally, absolutely, Rita, that I know Rita, she's got a lovely sense of humour. She won't mind that. I agree with you that up to the point of exciting hatred and violence, that's where the lines should be drawn. And but I don't agree. I don't think, as far as I'm concerned, that we should be over worried about offending people, because offence is subjective, and what offends one person doesn't necessarily offend another. That doesn't mean to say we shouldn't be thinking about what we're saying and thinking, well, are these words possibly offensive to some? Then you should maybe think twice. But I don't think we should be monitoring our speech and afraid of saying something just because someone might possibly take offense online. We've got some comments coming in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Hema's used it right. She said, I think so too. Well done. And I'm glad you agree with me, but Hema. Okay.
As far as I'm concerned, freedom of speech ends when it involves violence or a threat to another. So, yeah, we're on the same page, Javi. That's another expression you can use to agree with someone. We're on the same page.
Oh, and that's very nice, Javi. You said, in the meantime, we can sail in the vast ocean of freedom of speech. Yes, I think that sounds good too.
Yeah. Okay, so I think we've got time for one more question. Do you have a favourite, Lynn? Any particular question you want to throw up there?
Oh, well, here's a controversial one for now.
Go on then.
Should military service be compulsory?
Oh, yes, very controversial, very in the news at the moment.
Europe
is spending a lot of money on defense. Europe spending a lot of money on defense. Maybe we will be asked to serve our country, pick up arms, take up arms, and defend our freedoms.
Well, it's very interesting because when I grew up in the UK, there was no military service. There's still no military service in the UK. It was stopped in the 50s, I think, or the early 50s.
Yeah.
After the Second World War, there was no military service. But in other European countries, in Spain, in France, in Germany, military service was still obligatory, it was a little bit one-sided because women were not included in military service. I think in France and in Germany, and I think in Spain too, it was just men. But of course, at the end of the last century, the military service was phased out in many countries, wasn't it? It disappeared in Spain.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if it's still in France. I don't know about Italy. Maybe Rita can tell us. Or in Germany anymore.
But that's another interesting question. You just mentioned women. So if military service becomes compulsory for, let's say, 18 to 21-year-olds, should women be conscripted as well? Should women be called to serve? Because I think
they would be now.
I think they would be. But do you think they should be?
Well, do you know, when I grew up, I was always very much like, no, you shouldn't have military service. It's not necessary. But that's because I grew up in a generation where I thought the peace would last forever. And I don't know, I just never contemplated the idea of a war again in Europe.
Yeah.
And I know that, for example, countries in the UK are having, like, for example, they're having big problems. Nobody wants to join the army. And they don't want to join the army in other countries. And I haven't got sons, I have got daughters. I don't think I'd be very happy if they had to be sent to military service. But on the other hand, I also wouldn't be happy. I don't think it's right that you get to choose. I mean, if you want your country to be a certain way and there is a threat, maybe the fair thing is that everybody defends the country.
But doesn't that go back to what you said at the beginning of this live stream about nationalism and countries? I mean, you have to have, I think, a feeling of nationalism to go and serve your country, don't you?
You do. But the thing is, I think maybe as well, when there's a feeling that the peace is there and that everybody's playing by the rules, when there's no threat, then of course many people would not choose military service because they don't want to fight.
Yeah. So
but
what
you're
do you
not
think?
Under an existential threat, are you?
So what do you
it's a tricky thing. It's a tricky thing. So I think my opinion might be changing now. It's a complex issue.
It's a complex issue.
Well, it's complex and it's not. It's simple, really, but it's a different opinion depending on what the circumstances are.
Look, nobody likes bullies. Nobody likes people invading your country and taking over land and cities that are really yours. But would you lose your life for it? That's the question. Hammer's agreeing with me. Exactly, Craig. If you don't agree with someone, don't say anything. And Javi says the first goal of nations should be peace. Yes. But if there are unsolved conflicts like between the Koreas, I think military service is necessary. No, I think
it's necessary to have I think it's necessary to make military service compulsory.
Yes, it's necessary.
So you don't need the verb to be. It's necessary to make military service compulsory. I couldn't agree more with Javi there. I think Javi's hit the nail on the head there. I think
I see what you mean. It makes sense to me.
True. It makes sense because I think it's not legitimate to enjoy the benefits of the country that you live in and allow other people to sacrifice themselves. I think, like if the country is going to be in a conflict, then everybody has to participate. I understand people who object, conscientious objectors, but there are other ways you can serve your country. If you can't feel you can fight, but you have to volunteer labor or do something.
Well, let's hope it doesn't come to that. Let's hope that this whole crisis blows over, which means it disappears and sensible opinions and cool heads prevail, and that we don't get involved in anything that might involve conscription. Unfortunately, we are out of time, so thank you very much for your company. We hope this has been helpful, and we'll be back again in 2 weeks with another live stream. But before we go, we'll say goodbye and invite you to visit our websites.
Yeah, that's right. So putitlikethis.com is my website. I'm an online teacher and I tailor make courses for you to help you find your own voice in English. So if you're interested, go to the website and you can find out more.
And let's go there if you want more of Lynne, and who wouldn't? So putitlikethis.com is where you should go to.
I couldn't agree with you more, Craig. I couldn't agree with you more.
As far as I'm concerned. And if you're a Spanish speaker and you want to improve your English, mentioningles.com is the website to go to. And why not sign up for our newsletter, which is every month, different levels, exercises, listening activities, and lots more on our website for our newsletter that comes out every month. Our podcast comes out every week. You can listen to that at inglespodcast.com or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And next week, I'm starting more conversation courses. So if you're concerned about your fluency and you want to speak more effectively, then join me and a group of lovely people for some online conversation. More details over at englishcraig.com, and book a chat with me for 10 or 15 minutes, and I will give you all the information. So thank you for keeping us company. Good night to you, Javi, Gemma, Rita, everybody who's watching. Lovely to have you with us, and we'll be back again in a couple of weeks.
Yeah. Okay. So have a nice evening, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye. Take care.